My name is Alyssa Vincent, and I'm the residential horticulture agent here at the Manatee County Extension Office. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about planting and care of your plants for the 4-H FNGLA Plant Project. So you've picked out a good plant. You think you have something that's going to sell well. You've examined the leaves and the roots when you selected the plant to make sure that it looks healthy. The roots appear nice white, light tan. There's no evidence of any kind of rot or fungus or insects. Now, what are you going to do with that plant now that you have it? Well, you're going to need to select an appropriate container. You're going to need to think about potting that plant into that appropriate container, and then taking care of that plant until you sell it at the fair, scouting for pests and disease. When you select an appropriate container for your plant, you need to consider the mature size of the plant, not just the size of the branches and leaves, but the potential for flowers or fruit to cause the plant to be top heavy. You want to think about something that's going to be stable, that's going to provide adequate stability for a plant that may tip over in the wind. You want to make sure that your pot has adequate drainage. So you want to make sure that it has nice holes in the bottom so that the water can get out if it needs to. You're also going to want something that's not going to be too heavy for you to lift, and that's going to be easy for you to stage when it's time to set up your presentation at the fair. You've heard all about soil and how to get your soil ready, but do remember that you're looking for potting mix and that your plants need to be potted up in potting mix and not in native soil. Look for things that are nice and light and crumbly. You should see perlite or something else in there that's adding more drainage. If you're planting something like a succulent or a cactus, consider adding additional perlite because those plants need a lot of drainage. When you prepare to plant your plant, you want to make sure to gently remove it from the container that you purchased it in. You're going to check the roots to make sure that there's no circling or compaction of the roots and gently loosen them up. You're then going to place them in your new container in a hole that's an appropriate size in your potting mix. Don't tamp down the soil, don't compact the soil, just kind of gently backfill the soil around the roots. You've also learned all about fertilizer, but should you fertilize now? The answer is you can, but if you're going to choose to fertilize at the time of planting, you should top dress your soil rather than putting the fertilizer into the soil. You don't want to mix the fertilizer in with the soil, and you also don't want to pour fertilizer into the hole where your plant is going to go. That can cause damage to the roots. So now you've picked out an appropriate container, you've got your plants planted beautifully in them. How are you going to keep them healthy? Well, one of the things you're going to need to make sure to do is to water them frequently. Plants, especially plants that have been recently transplanted, are going to need to be watered every 2 to 3 days to make sure that they have adequate moisture. You want to check your soil before watering though, just to make sure that you're not overwatering, because overwatering can lead to problems with your plants. Protect them from storms, from winter weather if you're keeping your plants outside, and then check on their growth. Watch them for signs that they're not happy. Look for things like legginess or yellowing on the leaves or curling on the leaves. If your plant starts to wilt and the leaves start to curl, that may mean that you're not watering nearly enough or that there's some kind of a pest or pathogen that you need to take care of. So how do you know if there's a pest or a pathogen that you need to deal with on your plant? You're going to practice what's called integrated pest management. And the basic way of thinking about integrated pest management is that you're going to need to look at your plants. Monitoring and scouting is very important. Every time you go out to water your plants, you're going to want to check them from top to bottom. Look at the tops of the leaves, look at the undersides of the leaves, check the stems, check the soil, maybe poke around a little bit, see if you notice any insects crawling around. You're going to want to know whether or not your plant is susceptible to any particular diseases. So do your research on your plant. Know if you have any pests in your area, any pest insects. Think about things like the lubber grasshoppers. If you've seen them around, you're going to want to watch for them on your plants to make sure that they're not chewing your leaves. Know when some damage is acceptable or when action needs to be taken. So think about is it okay if I have a little bit of chewing damage on this leaf, or is it going to kill my whole plant and the caterpillars are going to eat everything? Recognizing when you can have a little bit of damage is a good thing because then you don't have to take any chemical measures. Should you prune your plant? Well, that's a good question. It depends on the type of plant you have planted. If you've planted a small tree or a shrub, it may be necessary to prune your plant for shape and for structure. You want to make sure that if you plant a small tree, that you're not encouraging it to have a co-dominant stem. So look for that main trunk and make sure you don't have any other branches coming off of that main trunk that may compete with it. Also, think about things like flowering plants that flower only on new growth. So, for example, pentas, you would want to trim those up a little bit if they have flowers on them at the time of planting to encourage new growth and maybe additional flowering for the time of the sale. Things to watch out for when you're scouting for pests and disease are going to be examples of insect damage. What you see on the slide in front of you are examples of insect damage. The picture of the leaf that is white and green is an example of a leaf that has been eaten by an immature insect. Something in the larval stage has gone through and removed a lot of the plant tissue. This is referred to as skeletonizing. So watch for skeletonizing of leaves and look for small larvae or caterpillars. The next photo is an example of aphid damage. Aphids attack the new growth on plants, especially if plants are putting out a lot of new growth all of a sudden. It's going to really attract those aphids, and they suck the juice out of the plants. The bottom picture, that the leaves appear to be kind of black, that's called sooty mold. If you see evidence of sooty mold on your plants, that's actually evidence that you have some other kind of insect that's a piercing, sucking insect like an aphid or a mealybug or a scale that's going to leave some kind of a sticky residue behind that the sooty mold is going to grow on. So if you see sooty mold, look for evidence of other insects. The other photo in the bottom is an example of spider mites. Spider mites tend to show up if your plants are too hot and dry. So you may need to move your plant to a different location where it can have a little bit more humidity. To deal with pests, one of the first things that you can do is scout, right? Because if you don't know that the pests are there, you're not going to know that you need to deal with them. If you have a small infestation of insects, you can try spraying them off with a strong spray of water from a hose, and then watch your plant to see if they return. You may need to apply some kind of insecticidal soap to your plant in order to deal with these pests if they continue to come back and continue to be a problem. But if you have questions on how to deal with these pests, feel free to email me, or you can reach out to our Master Gardener Plant Clinic or to anybody else in our office, and we will direct you appropriately. I hope you have a lot of fun growing your plants for the fair, and best of luck!